Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Forged by Trust podcast. My name is Robin Dreek, and I'm your host on this journey. And before we get going on today's episode, I want to remind everyone to please remember to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review and share it with as many people as you can because, as we say, if we have at least one bit of information another human being can benefit from, shame on us for not getting it to us. Anyway, joining me today is CK Goldiing. Documenting his unforgettable interaction with strangers, CK Goldiing is an award-winning writer and filmmaker. Captivated by human behavior and psychology, he is unflinching in his belief that ordinary people are deeply watchable. And I'll tell you what, CK is deeply watchable. I binge watched everything he put out because he has these amazing, beautiful interactions with other human beings and makes you feel like $1,000,000, both when you talk to him, interact with him, or even just watch him interacting with others. So I want everyone to sit back, relax, take out that pen and paper and take some notes because he's going to share some really great, genuine, sincere techniques to make it all about everyone else. Oh my gosh, I see his hand. He's getting close.
Hey, buddy.
Hi, CK. How are you?
I'm utterly wonderful. Thank you, Robin. How's your day? How's your morning? So
glorious. You know, the biggest challenge I have today is to stop using those I statements and make it about you because I am so excited. I have goosebumps. It was like the first day of school when I woke up. I literally woke up thinking I'm going to get to talk to CK today. And I'm flabbergasted that you are, and humbled and grateful that you're willing to come on and share your amazing expertise with myself, the audience, the world. And so thank you for brightening my day and everyone else's. Matter of fact, what was really unusual is I love sharing with my wife, you know, the guests I'm going to have on, and she always does a cursory look at, you know, who's coming on and stuff. And this is the first time she's ever said, wow, I love this guy you're going to talk with today, CK. He brings you in, you know, to his life. So how's your day starting out? Probably not as good as mine, but hopefully half as good.
Let's just imagine, Robin, that I started off having a bad day. You've just completely flipped it. It's just, wow. I feel like you and your wife need some love. I want to come over and hang. And
you know, the hug. I need the hug. And so I was choosing the graphics, you know, for this. I almost chose the graphic of you like this with your arms spread out because it just exemplifies you and your life so well, I think, in that you are just extremely, as you say, and as I've read, and this is just a great segue into what we're going to be chatting about in such a small amount of time, you know, and that's why likely if you have time, we'll probably be doing this a few times to capture all of CK, but you have this immense high emotional intelligence. And part of that emotional intelligence you have is this ability to instantly connect with human beings. And so with that, and I'm excited about this part because I don't know this whole story. What was your journey to becoming this magnet for human beings?
I, you know, one of the things I've been so energized about coming on and talking to you, Robin. And I'm staggered. I'm in such great company because you know how I feel about your podcast, albeit I've only discovered it. I've only been living with your podcast for the last just over a week. I discovered your podcast and I'm slightly in love with it. And I feel so humbled to be in the company that you've had on the show so far. But this is the first time I've been a guest on someone's show and they've required me to plow into the backstory of what carved me into the human I am today, I guess. And I'm really excited to talk about the psychology behind it. So to answer your question directly, ahead of our chat, I was thinking, where did I develop my fascination and curiosity around human beings and their behavior, their motivations? And the earliest memory I can think of, Robin, was at school when we had to give presentations for certain subjects, you had to get up in front of the class and you had to deliver a presentation for whatever reason it might be. And I remember being very young and thinking, what do I dislike in presentations? What usually switches me off? Because whatever the answer to that question is, I want to do the complete antithesis to that, because every conceivable way, I'm obsessed with engaging people on their level, not mine. And I remember doing presentations very young. I might have been like, I don't know, 13 or something, and figuring out and being fascinated by figuring out how can I draw people into this presentation so that they're comfortable, so that they're interested more critically, and so that they're engaged. Because I realized very young that if I could engage people, there'd be a higher chance that what I'm sharing, teaching, or explaining would sink in a lot easier than if they were distant and distracted and bored, for want of a better word. So I just remember being very young, being fascinated by how to engage people.
That is probably one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever heard anyone say. And I don't want to overstate this, but when I hear you say that, what I'm hearing is at the youngest age, where our brains are traditionally self-centered, focused, and insecure, and thinking the world's staring at us, your first inclination was, what does the world see when they see me? You were automatically defaulting to empathy. And you're thinking in terms of what the other person sees when they're seeing you, what would draw them in. So instead of thinking in terms of how can I convince them to be interested in what I'm having to say, you're thinking in terms of how can I inspire them to want to be interested to say. You were actually thinking in terms of their needs, wants, dreams, and priorities instead of your own by default. I mean, or do you think that was default, or was that part of your nature or nurture for you growing up, do you think?
It's nature or nurture in regards to my obsession with people's engagement. That's such an interesting question, and honest answer, I don't know, Robin. Actually, I don't necessarily know whether it's nature or nurture. I've always been so obsessive about in other people's experience of what I have to share with them. And I'd be remiss to sit here in front of you and say that it was entirely self-serving. There was about 80% of it was about making sure that they were engaged, interested, and curious. But there was a 20% of it that made me realize, well, what I have to share here is actually valuable. So I would prefer it if you'd listen, but in order to accomplish that, it can't be about me. So there's an interesting balance there of recognizing how I can accomplish my goal. But the only way I can accomplish my goal is actually being sensitive to your needs. And the two things mustn't be divorced in my mind. And there's so many instances when I'm making documentaries, social experiments, short films, and I'm always putting myself in the audience's position. And sometimes I'll not do something that my heart wants to do because I know that won't be interesting to the viewer. So although us filmmakers sometimes, Robin, we can be very self-obsessed and self-absorbed, and we want to do something that makes us look good. But I have no interest in looking good. I just want to make people feel something, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I want them to feel something. So I've just always had that mindset, really.
It's really interesting that you say a filmmaker too, because you put yourself in this great creative, and I'm going to call it a box, even though I filmmaking the way you do it isn't a box, but literally because of this skill set, you have immense empathy and seeing the world through anyone else's point of view, which is the most critical tool and skill set any human being can have to be successful, not just in filmmaking, but in anything in life. I mean, you have this ability to naturally forge trust, which is about making it about others because you can see the world. And so, and you're so kind with your words about, becoming obsessed, or I probably overstated that, with watching or listening to my YouTube, not my YouTube, my podcast. Well, equally, I've been binge watching CK, and just even from at that young age, you saying, your obsession, well, you do it in your filmmaking. I mean, that's exactly what you were doing with 61 Hugs is you had an ask, but the ask, you made it in terms of the other person. You immediately drew people in. I could probably watch that film, that short, again and again and again, because even though I wasn't the one experiencing the hug, I wanted it. I still want it. You remotely release oxytocin in people because of that. So, so let's dive into that. Do you have this skill set? You took this art form as a great filmmaker and as a great understander of human behavior, and you broke it down into a paint by number for folks. So so you don't just show and demonstrate through my actions, oh, just be like me and you too can interact with human beings in this beautiful way. But you actually broke it down into a couple actionable things. And so how do you make it about someone else other than yourself?
Oh, wow. I mean, ultimately, Robin, it really depends on the context. But in order to make this as broad and instantly applicable as possible, let's just talk about one-to-one interactions, be it with someone you're meeting for the first time, or more likely an existing connection, friend, collaborator of yours. And I have something that it's one of my favorite things to do, and I always feel a little bit cunning in the background because it's just my favorite thing to do in the world. And it's I guess for all intents and purposes, I call it the I Spy technique. And in any given interaction I have with any of the aforementioned groups of people, I always want to make sure that I leave that interaction having used the word I as few times as possible. And I'll come on to the reason for that in a minute. The reason might surprise people. It's actually twofold, but I always want to leave every interaction making sure I've used the word I as few times as possible. So that's why I call it the I Spy, because I'm zealously observing how many times I'm using the word I, and I want to mitigate that number.
Brilliant.
I want to mitigate that number. And then it's not just about using the word I less, it's about using the word you more. And I always want to make sure that I leave every interaction with a ratio roughly. It's not an exact science. I don't want to be excessively prescriptive, but I want to make sure I leave every interaction, Robin, with the yous at 7-1 with the I's. That's the rough ratio, you know. I'm not
Write this ratio down.
I'm not going to beat myself up if it's like 4-1, but I will beat myself up if my I's are higher than the U's. And, you know, this is all sounding very technical, but fundamentally what I'm talking about here, Robin, is something that I know you espouse zealously, and that's making whoever you're interacting with the primary focus. Giving them everything, giving them your attention, giving them your ear, giving them your time, your thoughts, your for everything. And why would you want to do that? Some people might be thinking, well, it just depends on your character. I'm naturally curious about other people, and I'll be brutally honest with you, I've known me for 42 years. So by talking about me, I'm not going to learn anything new. I already know me. So while I'm talking about me, what am I learning? But the more I'm hearing someone else talk, the more I'm learning about them, their thoughts, their hopes, their dreams, ambitions, drivers, just on a human level. I just find humans fascinating. So that's why I use the word I as few times as possible in any given engagement, and just allow people to just talk and educate and entertain and inspire me.
That is a beautiful way to really state that. A lot of people will ask, so how can you suspend your ego and how can you make it about everyone else? The I Spy method is a phenomenal way to really think about that, you know, really cognate and think, how many times are you saying the word I compared to saying you? And it's really about, you know, shifting that focus and being exceptionally self-aware. And it does, you know, for us crazy extroverts, slow us down and makes us really think. And even our pre-show that we had, we were talking, you had mentioned that, you know, I'd used to write on a piece of paper, and I'm using the word I again now. I'm being extremely self-conscious. You know, shut up, shut up, shut up. I literally have my show notes right here. It's about him, not about you. Be quiet and listen. And I'm still failing at it because I'm so curious about you. So the I Spy is a great, phenomenal way to start that shift and start that focus. And you had another one you had mentioned. What's another one?
Oh. First of all, before I share the other one, let me tell you that this is the first time I've put this out into the ether. And it's not that I've been hoarding it. I've just never had an opportunity because nobody's really necessarily delved into the psychology behind how I create. So this is the first opportunity I've had to share this. And I'm so excited because I can just imagine your listeners ending this podcast and they can try immediately and they'll be stunned by the impact that it generates.
Yes.
I'm excited by that. So this is something that I just happily stumbled across. I think it was about 4 years ago, and I just tried it for the first time. And think about our day, Robin. Where is our attention focused the most in any given day? It's going to be difficult. You might not get this. Mobile phone. The mobile phone is one of our biggest focuses in any day. And now so then what I noticed, once people were having conversations in a coffee shop with their friend and the phone rang, they're instantly They could have been immersed, Robin, in the most fascinating, engaging conversation known to man. But the minute the phone rings, they can't. And I just thought that is I don't know if rude is an overstatement, but for me, it's the word that's most appropriate. And I just remember thinking, wow, how important is that call possibly going to be? So then I thought to myself, okay, this is what I'm going to do the next time I'm out. So I just didn't do that. I naturally never did that. So what I started to do was just observing how people would react if I just ignored the phone call when it rang. So there's two ways to do this. If your phone rings and you're having a conversation with someone, don't even pay any mind. Don't look at it. Just continue talking. What you'll find happens, and this is what I love watching every single time, the person you're engaging with freaks out. I don't know if you can swear on this podcast, but they lose their shits from it.
That's good. That's fine. How good.
If your phone rings and you don't even pay any mind, the person you're in a conversation with loses their shit. And that's what I find most fascinating, because it's like, well, why would I look at my phone? I'm engaged in a really interesting conversation with you right now. And let me ask you a question, Robin, because this is what fascinates me. When was the last time, Robin, you received a phone call that if you hadn't have answered it immediately, it would have been detrimental to you either personally or professionally? When was the last time you received a phone call of that nature?
Never. I can't even remember one. And you bring up such a great, beautiful point in that too. I love that you don't even look at the phone and don't take the call, because some people will look at the phone. Basically, they're saying, I'm now assessing you and your value compared to this, which is very judgmental. Shields up. So even if you then default back to them, they still feel like they're being judged and judge worthier than. And so in their mind, they're thinking to themselves, oh, if someone even more important jumped in, he would have or she would have put me aside. So I love, don't even pay attention to it. Don't even look at it. Don't even regard it, because you, no matter what happens in the world, are the most important thing going on right now.
What I love about what you just said there, Robin, is you said that by not looking at it, by looking at it, you're subconsciously giving out a signal and you're placing their value underneath the value of this phone call. And what I love about the fact you said that is I'm in complete accordance with it. But the beauty of it is it's a very subconscious microsecond inference that the person makes from that. Like in a split second, the minute you disappear, in a split second, that person's just felt something that they're not that important to you right now. And it's a very micro feeling. It's a very micro feeling. And you mentioned don't look at it, don't answer it. I mean, one thing you can do, which actually does give the phone some attention, but it actually works in developing that trust, is just reach over and silence it so that the ring shuts up. Reach over and silence it. I do it without even breaking eye contact. And what I say, I can't stress enough. What I love about this is that the person that you're engaging with, they've never seen anybody do that, ever. And because they've never seen it before, it freaks them out. But not only did it freaks them out, it instantly says to them, no, you're more important. It can wait. And it's very scarce that in any given interaction, people feel more important than anything else in the room. If you give that to someone, it's a special feeling, and they'll never forget it.
And you bring out such a great point in that too. And I got goosebumps. I get goosebumps so much when I talk to you. It has such a great message of focus. And with human beings, the most incredible thing is everyone always thinks that people are looking for you to be perfect. No, they're looking for you to make an effort. And so by that one small yet catastrophically impactful gesture, it gives you so much other wiggle room with that human being, because again, they're not looking for you to be perfect. They're looking for you to make an effort. And when you demonstrate through that one small act, that huge effort on their behalf, it allows you to, be, I think it, instead of having a 7-to-1 ratio of the eyes to use, it'll probably give you a 1-to-1 ratio and you'll still be okay. Because they know, hey, everyone's got faults, everyone's working on something, but in their heart, I am their focus. And so it does give you a little bit more. So I call this pebbles in a bucket that tilt the scales to your side when you're having these engagements, because that's how you make it all about them. What other things do you have? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, your conversation with Jack Schaefer, you've not had a conversation that I've not vigorously taken note. I love every conversation you've had. Your conversation with Jack Schaefer was quite special, and he said some really salient things, including, people just want to feel listened to and heard.
Yes.
driving us all is just a feeling to be listened to and heard and just acknowledged. And the minute your phone is more important, you're not that important to me at the moment, I'm afraid. And like I said, listen, I'm not here trying to present myself as any kind of god. It's pure. And I'm happy to say that the phone call reject technique is quite selfish on my part, because as I said to you a moment ago, Robin, I just want to learn about humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm talking on the phone, I can't learn about a human. So it's just a very beneficial byproduct that while I'm selfishly learning more about this person, they're also feeling more significant. So it's a complete win-win. Now, not everybody's interested in people, so I get why that won't motivate a lot of people, but it definitely motivates me, so that's why it works.
And that's such a powerful thing you say as well. An old expression is, you have, one mouth and 2 ears, because you're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. And that just exemplifies it more. I love that you say, when I'm speaking, I'm learning nothing, because I already know this reality show. And we've stated it before that, you are an incredibly fascinating reality show to watch. And that's a great discovery for us all to have, especially for us extroverts that tend to be self-centered. When I just slowed down and just started watching the world around us, it became this amazing reality show. There is not a human being alive that is not fascinating. The journey is, it's why a great question to start out with, I think, that gets that ball rolling is, how did you wind up being the person you are today? Because that is an amazing show to learn about. Again, this show, I know. Tell me about that show, because it's truly fascinating. What inspired CK to get out of bed that day and want to have 61 hugs?
It's such a great question. And there's been different chapters in my life, and again, in anticipation of this conversation, I was thinking, what's the through line of them all? Because I'm in the chapter in my life now when I'm a observer of human behavior, and then I package it up in these uplifting, fun, inspiring little stories. So I guess I'm in the documentary maker chapter. But preceding this chapter, I was a radio presenter, I was a magazine writer, newspaper writer, columnist. So I've done all these things, and as you know, I have a PR agency as well. But fundamentally underpinning all of this, Robin, is just communication, right? The through line through all of this is communication, and just my fascination with how humans communicate with each other and how we can elicit feelings from each other, how I can make someone smile, how I can make someone laugh, how I can make someone feel wince a little bit. I've always been fascinated by that in any arena. And I guess this current chapter, documentary making, is the most expressive and the most inclusive, because it drags everybody in a very visceral way. When I used to write magazine columns, it was CK writing, and I never got to see necessarily how the reader would engage with that column. Obviously, we'd get the email saying, I'm loving the column, or they'd reach out to you on Twitter or whatever. But the beauty of doing it within the moment and spontaneously in a documentary fashion is that we're both experiencing that together, and it's instant, and I get to feel it. And you mentioned earlier on, I like to make people feel things, and I like to feel things myself.
It's an interesting connection I'd love to try to make if we could. And that is, you started out saying, let's talk about this one-on-one, the things that we're doing, with these techniques. And then you also mentioned you're in the phase of life that you're a documentary maker, as well as you're running your PR firm for people that are running businesses, that are entrepreneurs and trying to build clientele by making people, if you can, is it about making people attractive to you to draw them in, or some other message? So how are you messaging the greatness of CK and bringing people in and connecting? How do you do that remotely or with more distance involved?
Are you talking specifically via the PR operations, Robin?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, it's just, it's like, I guess how do you bring it to a broader audience than the one-on-one?
Oh God, I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know where to start on that. I mean, I will bring this back temporarily back to 61 Hugs, because this is something that I've never even mentioned before. But an interesting observation that some people make when they watch 61 Hugs is that they'll say, for example, 61 Hugs, I don't know if you've mentioned it, that's the documentary which won your heart, and I'm super happy about that.
Yes, and we're going to put links to everything, especially 61 Hugs, at the end of this. I think it's just such a great short film that is just inspirational. If you're having a bad day and listening to this, watch that film. You'll feel great. And if you know someone that's having a challenging bad day, have them watch that film. It'll bring about the greatest emotions internally for you and make you feel inspired again and get you rolling for the next. Anyway, go ahead, CK.
Oh, wow. That is, thank you, Robin. And actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember a few months after the film was released, I'm based in the UK, in London. I remember someone reached out to me in Philadelphia because the film kind of spread its tentacles internationally. And a young girl reached out to me in Philadelphia, and she direct messaged me on Facebook and said, CK, I woke up in such a horrible place this morning because I experienced some racism last night. One of my friends on Facebook watched 61 Hugs, and she sent it to me. I watched it, and it just lifted my day. And you know, comments like that you just never forget.
Beautiful.
So to answer your question, like, you know, again, about my obsession with, okay, so let's talk about something that Abby said, another one of your guests, something that Abby said on one of your previous episodes, which I loved to death. She said, if you want to generate, or if you want to cultivate trust with someone, don't think, how do I make this person trust me? Instead, think, how do I make this person feel safe with me?
Yes.
And I've never heard a single human being distill my beliefs into such an eloquent sentence in my life. I was clapping loud. So Abby said that, and then it gave me an answer which I can now use moving forward when people ask me when they watch 61 Hugs, because this is a question that I do receive now and again, Robin. People will watch 61 Hugs and they'll say, why did you tell people in your approach, why did you tell people that it was part of a challenge? Why didn't you just approach people and say, can I have a hug? And that question was just bizarre to me. It was utterly bizarre. And I don't understand why I would do that. And I just said, and I said, why would I do that? And they say, well, why wouldn't you? And I said, well, because if you go up to someone that you've never met in the street and say, give us a hug, they're instantly going to be a million questions in their head. And the main one is, who is this guy? I don't feel safe. Why are you asking me that? And for me, it was just it wasn't even a question I ever considered. It was just a natural default that I was going to tell them why. And this comes down to my obsession and understanding in psychology, I guess, in that usually if you have a request of someone, you will find that if you tell them why you're asking for that thing, then your compliance just escalates almost tenfold. Yes. And there was a study in the 70s which I loved, and it was a photocopy study. Have you heard of it, Rob? The photocopy. Which one?
Yes. I have to, can I get ahead of you because I have to make this copy? Because you gave the because and the why, they let you cut in line. Yes, it's a great study.
It doesn't even matter what the reason is. The reason can be ridiculously laughable, but just giving them a reason helps. So if you say to somebody, for example, do you mind if I take some copies? Sorry, can I jump ahead of you in this queue and make some copies? Then there's a high chance they'll say, well, no, just queue like everybody else. But if you say, can I jump ahead of you and make some copies? Because I need to make some copies. It's a ridiculous reason, but the chances of them complying escalate. Anyway, that's by the by. Just my obsession with psychology creeping in there. But no, why would I not tell them that it was part of a challenge? Because instantly that lowers their barriers and makes them understand what is going on here. And it just makes it a more human thing than for them guessing why. Where's your knife?
Absolutely. And it honors, one of the three pillars of leadership to me, and that is, open, honest communication and transparency. A lot of times people will say, aren't all these things, and it sounds like you kind of worry about this a little bit now and then as well. When you're intentionally making it about others, isn't that kind of manipulative? Isn't it kind of taking advantage because you know the psychology of others, and is that right or wrong? Well, my answer to always that is transparency. Transparency is the great equalizer of everything. When you come with transparency, how can it be manipulative? How can it be taking advantage of someone? Because you're given the why. And, Robert Cialdini in his great book, Influence, says, human beings on first contact with strangers are looking for three things for psychological comfort and safety. And that is who you are, what you want, and how long is this going to take? because that empowers them with knowledge. It empowers them to make choices. And you answered, when you're asking for that hug, you empowered them with all those things. You said, "Hi, my name's CK. I have this challenge that a mate gave me this morning, for 61 hugs between my place and city center. Is this okay? Do you have time for this? Is this something you wouldn't mind doing?" So you honored all those things, even though it was an ask. You answered all those questions. It seemed reasonable. And at the even mere thought of getting some oxytocin from the other person, again, it's a subliminal thing. There's like, "Oh, let us try it." And then you reward them by calling it a proper hug. You totally validate them and how well they hug. I thought it was brilliant.
Well, thank you. Listen. She was one of my favorite hugs, and I'm glad it impacted you too. But I can't stress enough, the reason that I was stipulating the reason for the hug wasn't because I was trying to increase my chances of getting one. It wasn't a psychological exercise. It just happens to be the case that is just the truth. The reason I was telling them that it was part of a challenge was because I have no interest in doing anything that makes people feel uncomfortable. So it's
Right.
a human reason. That's why I was doing it. The fact that it actually makes them, the fact there's a psychological connection, I actually learned many, I think it was about a year later I discovered that challenge. And I was like, okay, that vindicated me in some way when I discovered that bit of research from the 70s. But yeah, my motives are always based on what's going to make people feel most comfortable in this interaction. And it's a similar thing with the bench. If you're going to sit on a bench at late, that was a 7-part series I created where I sat on a bench late at night.
Which is a beautiful series as well.
Thank you very much. And I asked passing strangers late at night in a very isolated, dark place a simple question. Then I invited them to join me on the bench and talk it out. And I always made sure I was sitting down on the bench so that they were higher than me as they walked past, so that they were in a position of power and that they didn't feel threatened per se. So I'm just so keenly obsessed about just making sure everybody I interact with feels okay and feels safe and doesn't feel threatened.
Feels comfortable. So I'm curious, life's an evolution and not a destination as a process. How have all these things you've learned, translated into running a PR company?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's so, let's consider what I mentioned a moment ago, Robin, when I was talking about when I was that 13-year-old kid, fascinated by how can I make this audience interested, engaged? How can I open their hearts and their imagination for enough time for me to enable my actual message to sneak in through the back door, when I was doing that presentation as a 12-year-old kid. Right. And there is absolutely no difference when I'm working with a brand that wants to elevate their profile in the mainstream consciousness. And then one of my favorite things to say to clients when I first start working to them is, again, I think I have this sadistic interest in seeing people confused. But one of my favorite things to say to clients is, you do understand that nobody cares about your brand, right? And then they'll usually say,
that's great.
They'll usually look a little bit incredulous and they'll say, "What do you mean?" And I say, "Listen, you need to understand that nobody cares about your brand as an opening point. You care about it and I care about it because I want you to do well. But the average human in the street has never heard of it, let alone care. So what we need to do to actually address that disbalance a little bit is we need to share a story, a true story. I'm not interested in fabricating things. I don't do that. We need to share a true story that is relatable to them, that means something to them on a human level. So we need to express elements of your brand they have an affinity with, an understanding of, a connection with on a very human level. So that's where we need to start. And then once you engage their imagination and their hearts through familiarity, what you'll notice then is that you'll just spark a little bit of curiosity in them and think, why did I just feel this about that brand? And then they'll be curious to learn more about it. So if you actually start just leading with what you're trying to sell, it's a complete waste of time.
Right. What have you found is the greatest challenge that both individuals and companies, and organizations you work with have in doing this and accomplishing these things?
Well, this question is going to be deeply frustrating to people because it's a clinical answer, but I'm afraid it's the truth. And I would actually argue writing. And what I mean by that is copywriting, the principle of writing words in a sequence that is more conducive to the outcome you're looking for. So let me just explain what I mean by that.
Sure.
Obviously, copywriting is one of the main things that we do through the agency. And when you're reaching out to a TV network, for example, to potentially place a client or for them to be interviewed in the studio, you have maybe 2 sentences max, usually 1 sentence to communicate value to that TV network. You have like a sentence to get that message across. So the ability to be efficient with your words, but also use words that cultivate and stir a certain emotion in the person that's going to read that email, that in of itself is a real art form. That's usually what I find limits people's success, not understanding the actual how to sequence a sentence to engage someone's imagination, their heart, and so on.
I think there's not a individual, whether you're posting for yourself on social media or a company out there, that isn't looking for how do you garner that kind of attention through great copy. So how do you do that? And again, without giving away your secrets, because that's why people want to hire you. But I'm curious, does that ability shift based on current trends, what current pain points in the world, or is that pretty consistent? So what's that require on your part to be able to do that? Or is it kind of repeatable each time the same way?
Let me just backtrack. Listen, I have no interest in hiding any secrets. It's right. One of my favorite mantras of this show, Robin, is what you say in almost every episode, is that if you have information, shame on you for not sharing it with as many people in any way you can. And I'm in complete agreement with that. That's why I love this podcast, because I completely agree.
Thank you.
That's why I launched the series on the agency website called Win with Words, where I'm telling everybody all of this stuff, because it's taken me a reasonable period of time to kind of accumulate the knowledge, I guess. And I just want to share it with people because I want everybody to write better, because I love writing. So to answer your question, for sure, there's absolutely some hard and fast, tried and true writing techniques that will never change, but will always be incredibly powerful. The rule of 3 is one of them. If I'll not bore your listeners to tears now, but if anybody wants to go into Google and type in copywriting rule of 3, that is one tool you cannot underestimate in your armory. But my ultimate favorite, someone said to me, what's your ultimate favorite for effective writing? I won't even flinch. I'd say the open loop. And again, if anybody wants to go onto the Icons and Machines website, which is my agency, just type in the search field open loop. I've written many articles about
open loop. Okay.
The open loop is essentially understanding that if you can write a sentence that peaks, the technical definition of an open loop is a sentence that demands a resolution, but the resolution isn't presented immediately. So if you open a piece of writing with something that makes you think, what does that mean? You need to give the solution to what that means, maybe 4 or 5 sentences later, just to maintain their interest. And honestly, I recently worked with a law firm. They wanted to enter some awards categories, and it's the first time they ever entered award categories. And they commissioned me to be the lead writer for all their entries. They wanted to enter 3 categories, and they got me to write their entries for all of them. Of all the 3 we entered, they were nominated in all of them and won 1. And
congratulations.
Thank you very much. But the opening sentence of the category that they won, but I'm so proud of it, because it was just a perfect open loop, in so much as the awards moderators would have looked and thought, what does that mean? And then they just carried on reading. And again, that's on the website as well. So just go to Win with Words on the website, and just there's a article in there called How Your Business Can Win More Awards, or something like that.
Right. There you go.
I explain everything I did for my client in that article. Because like I said, Robin, I want everybody to know these things.
I have quite a few more questions, but I think I'd be remiss if we don't kind of explore a little bit, because I think might be a good segue from this. We worked on, titles are exactly what we're talking about now, because how do you attract that attention? And I thought you came up with, because, all hats off to you on this one. You came up with the title of this episode. So I'd love to explore that and the meaning of that, the unusual power of significance. Dive a little bit deeper on the power of significance.
That's my biggest love, human interactions. And for me, every interaction I have, I just want that person to just leave that thinking, just feeling something in them, but not understanding what they're feeling. I know what they're feeling. They're feeling significant. But they just feel listened to and heard and understood. And that is ultimately underscored by just feeling significant. So I just want to make people feel significant. And, we've mentioned this already, ignoring your phone. What does that say? My phone is insignificant. You are significant, right? Using the word I less and using the word you more. What does that mean? It means I'm insignificant, you're significant, right? And it's just, you know, your conversation with Joe Navarro, that handsome man, right? You know, he said in an episode, like, if someone says to me, because we feel the same, Joe and I, about this kind of thing, and he says to me, well, what do you get out of giving all the attention to that person? And he just said, well, what do I get? I'd make someone feel good. I make someone feel worthy, and I might get another friend. What else is there?
Right.
Correct.
It's also, you know, as we've discussed before too, it's no accident that, at least in my estimation, that, you know, all the recovery programs that have ever been invented, all the 12-step programs, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, Drug Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, I Talk About Myself Too Much Anonymous, whatever they are, the final step in all is being of service to others. And that's exactly what you get out of these things, you know, and you've obviously experienced it as a filmmaker. Is the reward you get is when people give you that phone call, send you that text and say, thank you for the gift you gave me today because it made such a difference in my life. That is and that's what leadership is based around, that servant leadership, which I love sharing with others, because the greatest leaders in the world aren't brokering their power, which is about self. They are, you know, conduits of resources for the success of others without that expectation of reciprocity. And the final thing I think we can squeeze in that we had chatted about, you wanting to share, being able to share, is the squeeze the silence technique that you had mentioned. Can you share a little bit of that?
Before I do, can I just mention something?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Something you just said there, Robin, was not hyperbole. When you just said making someone feel significant, making someone feel valued, making someone feel heard, and you'll receive a text message saying thank you for that. That isn't an abstract guess on your part, because I didn't mention this earlier on, but if people are willing to actually just play around with these things and actually listen to people and ignore their phone, I guarantee what you'll start noticing, especially when it's someone you're meeting for the first time, I guarantee, and I have no doubt on this, you'll notice that you'll actually start getting text messages from these people. You'll start getting emails from these people. You'll start getting a message on LinkedIn from these people. All they'll say is, I really enjoy talking. They're not going to say, here's my money, take it. They're just going to say, I really enjoy talking with you. And because you've made them feel special, made them feel significant. And then if anything comes from that beyond it, well, so be it. But all you need to be doing really is making people feel good about themselves, I would argue.
CK, that is the most profound thing in this entire conversation, I think, and that anyone can take away from this is that feeling you get from being of that service to others, taking someone else's beauty and being able to pass along to someone else. I'm glad to share again, you know, what our good friend Joe Navarro says. If you have at least one bit of information another human being could benefit from, shame on us for not getting it to them. So that's part of that. But being on this side and helping be even a greater part and getting even more content and putting out more for other people, this is the greatest reward, because it's taking beautiful people like you with this amazing interpersonal art form and making it a paint by numbers for others. I guess what you and I are saying together is, hey, everyone that's listening, go out, take these skills and be a service to others. And you're going to have amazing rewards for yourself in your life. Because if nothing else, your energy level is going to spike. And with higher energy, higher output, when it's of service to others, you will be more successful in anything you want to put your finger on. So,
yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And you know, I would argue that these tools that we've been exploring and sharing and talking about today, they'll really benefit people who maybe, I mean, these tools are so exquisite for introverts. People will laugh at this. People will laugh at what I'm going to say next, but I'm a massive introvert. I get enormous energy from my own time, my own space, being able to swill in my own thoughts. That's where I get my energy from. And because of that, when I'm with people, I like to give them the podium. So what you'll find is that all these tools are great for people who are actually introverts, who don't want the spotlight to be on them all the time, because what you're naturally doing is actually just listening and giving your mate all the attention, right? So it's a great tool. Extroverts might struggle with it, as I'm sure you'll agree, Robin.
Yep. Speaking on behalf of us, yes, it's very humbling. Extremely humbling. Every day it's humbling. It's horrible. It's embarrassing. The greatest challenge, actually, if you ever want to be humbled even more, try editing your own podcast. And the most editing I do is of myself. Not the guests are fine. I'm an idiot.
I actually think you're the most highly functioning, empathetic, extrovert I've ever encountered, Robin, frankly.
That's why the greatest challenge I have is one of the greatest reasons to do a pre-show is get all that high energy out, so that hopefully if I don't scare away the guests during the pre-show, when they come back for the second one, they see at least a lower tone guy because the fact that he responded after the pre-show, after I come at you, and can you imagine even if I had a lot of coffee? Because I just love interacting, and I have all these things popping into my head nonstop, and silencing that brain is really challenging for us extroverts. So there you go.
I think you're superb at self-moderation.
Sorry, laughing at myself.
Let me just share the squeeze the silence thing. So I guess this is the final morsel within my trilogy of tips you can go out and use immediately. So squeeze the silence. And this is, again, tapping into our natural tendency as humans to feel deeply uncomfortable with silences. There's always an overwhelming urge to fill them with what I call stuff. Well, everybody calls it stuff, but it's just meaningless stuff. We always feel this need to fill a silence with stuff. So what's really interesting, if you're having a conversation with someone, there's going to be a time when both of you stop. Well, if you're having a conversation with someone and that person stops talking, there's a natural inclination to want to actually jump in and say something. I'm quite happy to not, actually. Like, I'm happy for that silence to become the most uncomfortable thing in the room at that precise moment, because what you'll usually find is that if I'm not going to fill it, you can guarantee they will fill it, and they'll just share something else. They'll tell me something else. And guess what? CK has another opportunity to learn. That's, so squeezing the silence is one of my favorite things. Don't fill it. Just, and the reason I use the term squeezing, I kind of look at it like an orange. You know, squeezing all the juice out of an orange. Just keep on squeezing that silence to get every last droplet out of it. That's why I call it squeezing the silence.
It's a great visual analogy. And speaking as an expert, I can tell you, yes, it works exceptionally well. So when you are forging trust and you have that great semblance of trust going already, and then that silence is introduced, an individual will fill that silence with the most amazing, beautiful content that you can now explore. I call it's just a buffet. When a human being, because what's amazing is, the 4 pillars of communication I love that keeps that focus on others is seeking the thoughts and opinions of others instead of sharing your own. The second is to talk in terms of their challenges and priorities. You validate them without judging them, with that great curiosity, and you give them choices. And when you're squeezing a silence and you have trust, they're going to fill it with all of their priorities, challenges, and pain points, which tells the great listener like CK, this is what they're interested in. Let's explore one of these things together, because that is what is a pain point, not what I'm thinking, what they're thinking. It is a beauty. It's an art. And some people like you do it very naturally. Other people like myself, it's a conscious effort to shut the hell up. It's very challenging, especially when you get excited. And kind of put it all together, and you'd mentioned this earlier, which is absolutely perfect and beautiful. These are great skills, tools, and techniques. As simple as they sound, they're very challenging to put into place. They're easy to say, hard to do, because our ego, vanity, insecurities, all these things play out. And so as an introvert, there are great things that help you come out and engage. And as an extrovert, it helps you to pull back and not be the center of focus and allow the other person to be. So I find these to be great at helping others engage more effectively and become that center of focus, like you said. And as we say back here, be significant.
Completely. And let me just conclude, Robin, by managing everybody's expectations, because what you and I have just done is given people 3 fun little tools they can go out and use instantly. But if they're anything like me, they're probably thinking, which one should I use first? Should I use them all? I don't know. But I just want to manage people's expectations and let them know the one that they're going to struggle with the most. And you kind of just alluded to it now, Robin. I can guarantee, of the I Spy technique, the phone call reject technique, and the squeeze the silence technique, the one you're going to find the most difficult is squeeze the silence, because it's almost working against our physiological drivers that have been cultivated over thousands of years. We're not keen on silence. So you're literally working against thousands of years to do the squeeze of silence. So if you find it really hard to just say nothing when nothing's happening, don't beat yourself up. Everybody does. It takes practice. So that's the one you're going to struggle with the most, I guarantee. The one that you're going to find the easiest to do, I would say, is definitely the phone call one. I mean, it's difficult, that one, because you have to wait for, someone has to phone you at the right time, I guess, but it's just leave the phone, for God's sake. Just leave it. It's fine. You can call them back. That's fine. And then in terms of using the word I less and using the word you quite a lot, I consider that to be the interview.
I think that's a hard one. I just said it again. It's such a me world. I think a great way to say that and encapsulate that one, Tasha Eurich in her book Insight was really good. Ask yourself and observe yourself, and am I being a me former or am I being a informer? And that's a good way to look at it as well. And you are a great informer. The other thing that you did majestically throughout this, more I think than any other guest I've ever had, is you have stated my name. So that's also right from Dale Carnegie's. You mentioned him in the 3rd episode of The Bench. You quoted Dale Carnegie at the very end of it, how to win friends and influence people. The sweetest sound in the world to another human being is their name. And you use mine a lot. So thank you for that. So you do it very naturally.
Listen, do you know what's, and this is going to be the supplementary last point I'm going to make.
Please do.
I only discovered this podcast, as I mentioned, I think this is my 2nd week of living with your podcast. And what's happened is that in anticipation of this chat, I revisited some of the documentaries I made in the past. And then actually, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professor. I'm just fascinated by humans. That's
You're a master practitioner.
Maybe. That's why I read all this stuff. But it's only now that I've begun to realize, oh, okay, so you were doing that there. You're doing, I don't do anything knowingly as such. My character is just quite empathetic. That is my character. I've not had to cultivate that persona. And it's only now that I've been learning through geniuses like Joe Navarro and Abby and Maria and Jack. It's only through just listening to those people talk, who are way beyond me, that I've realized that just my natural leanings and proclivities. So it's just been nice to ground everything that I've done just naturally in actual, I suppose, researched something or another. It's just been nice to see that, actually, because I was never aware of it necessarily in the past. So
now you know exactly why your emotional intelligence is so high. And it's so funny because emotional intelligence is something that people can increase throughout their life. And I think if you put into practice these simple 3 things, again, it's easy to say simple 3 things, more challenging to put into practice 3 things, your EQ will go up. Because out of the top 500 Fortune CEOs in the world, they will all tell you, and research is solid, that it's not the impact of their IQ that's ever made a difference to them and their success. It's been their EQ, and it does grow over time when you become more self-aware. And that's another topic that we can definitely chat again, is your immense self-awareness. But for now, I want to thank you so much, CK, for coming on and sharing. And would you share with everyone where they can find out more about CK? Because you have amazing free resources out there, both for themselves that they can put into action for their own lives, but also where they can actually feel better about themselves as well by watching your shorts. Where should people go?
All right, let's leave it super simple for them, I guess. I mean, in terms of the film, which I'm super proud of, and I'm really grateful that I love the wife anecdote you shared with me, Robin. I'm going to be walking on cloud 9 all day. Say hi to the wife for me, please. I'm really
definitely will. She just walked in too. She's behind listening.
So if anybody would like to watch the film, I'd love them to. I think it's 23 minutes. So time it takes you to drink a coffee. 61hugs.com to watch that for free. I hope you enjoy it. Say hi to me on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. And if you'd like to learn some super useful writing tips, just for your life or for your business, then maybe the agency. If you just type in Google icons and machines and click on the Win with Words tab underneath services, then they can find all my previous articles on writing effectively, and apply it immediately and you'll see some great results.
Thank you so much, CK. I can't wait to chat with you more. I thank you immensely. I have great gratitude that you did reach out and we've become friends, because this is a lifetime journey together. I can't wait to chat again. So thanks again for coming on, and thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll chat with everyone more later.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Forged by Trust. If you enjoyed the show, took away a few new tools, I hope you will leave a great review of the show to show your support. If you're interested in more information about how to forge your own trust building strategies, please visit my website at www.peopleformula.com. You can also follow me on my social media sites included in the show notes. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Forged by Trust.